Welcome to Purpose 360. I'm Carol Cohn, and today more than ever before, companies, brands, and their partners need to stand for something beyond the bottom line. I've created this program to provide insights and ideas to share with you so that you can apply them to your work the very next day. The goal here is to up-level your purpose and to benefit companies and society. So please join us. Today's going to be one of my favorite podcasts in the last 2 years. Joining me is the founder of the Unreasonable Group, Daniel Epstein. And their name says there's a really different way of addressing solutions to some of the world's biggest problems. What makes Unreasonable different? Well, they're driven by a sense of impatience when it comes to putting a dent on the world's toughest challenges. To this end, rather than working with entrepreneurs at the seed and early stages of their development, like accelerators and incubators, at Unreasonable, they've found that the best approach to support growth stage entrepreneurs who are already wielding the most impactful solutions of our times. Today, they have a community of over 200 fellows. That's companies, but they call the CEO fellows, the CEOs, that are positively impacting hundreds of millions of people in more than 180 countries around the globe. They focus simply on scaling what works. So join me on this journey with Daniel. It is one that is going to open your eyes wide, and it's going to just fill you with thinking of opportunity and the potential of partnerships. This is a great two-part conversation. Welcome to the show, Daniel.
Thank you, Carol. And your introduction is far too kind, but I am very excited to be here with you as well.
Super. So let me now embarrass you a little bit more.
More? Yeah.
Because I love accelerator programs, but Unreasonable is more than an accelerator program. And, why is it called Unreasonable? Well, on their website, there's this wonderful quote from George Bernard Shaw that says, "The unreasonable man adapts himself to the world. The unreasonable one persists in trying to adapt the world to himself. Therefore, all progress depends on the unreasonable man and woman." So what does the Unreasonable Group do?
Great question.
Well, they operate, I've told you I'm going to embarrass you, immersive programs for growth stage entrepreneurs, offering solutions to seemingly intractable challenges. And you'll find all over their website, they call them BFPs, big fucking problems. And we're going to hear about how they approach them. They're more. They're a multimedia company, a private global network, and an investment firm. And what they do, which just totally warms my heart and my superhuman power of creating unlikely partnerships, is that they do those. They introduce those. They have them working with mentors and companies, and they're working with some of the world's largest institutions and most admired brands. And I remember, Daniel, the last time we chatted when I was in Boulder, which had to be, I think, 3 or 4 years ago, you were talking about Barclays. Yep. And I am so proud. I want you to talk about the program that you have developed with Barclays down the road. So right before we get into our conversation, the company has amazing values. And I want you to talk about those values because it attracts so many special people from around the world to you. And then the other thing I love about you And one of your values, which I think is great, it's like no assholes. Yay. I love that. And then you have great energy and you work incredibly hard. Show up and keep going forward. But then your last value, which is really important today, you say family and health first, which is that if you're not healthy and if your family's got an important something you have to do, drop what you're doing and go serve it. So, Daniel, with that crazy long introduction, I want to welcome you again to the show. And first, tell me a little bit about Daniel Epstein and how you became to be so unreasonable.
Yeah, I think I was I was born that way in some ways. But let me just start by saying, thank you, Carol, for the opportunity, and to all the listeners who are going to lend us their ears and minds and hopefully hearts for the duration of this podcast. I'm just grateful to be here. It's just interesting. I think I was maybe born with a little bit of a screw loose. And then that was, that was probably fostered with good parenting. But I have 2 older brothers. I think that I'm the youngest child kind of pattern emerged, which is pretty typical in the sense that my parents were really strict with my first brother and had a lot of rules. And second brother, still pretty, reasonably strict. And I think by the time they got to the third son, they were basically tired and they just said, do whatever you want, just don't kill yourself.
That's so funny.
So I was given a long leash. Part of that was, yes, horsing around as a kid, but the other part is looking at the world, being able to question a lot of what I see. And when I went to university, I studied philosophy. I remember my parents giving me a long leash on that because they're all in the medical profession and thought, what are you going to do with a philosophy degree? But for me, I dropped out of business school and studied philosophy because I realized that philosophy was teaching me how to think and business school was teaching me what to think. And those were very different things. One gave me energy and one just stole it away from me.
Interesting.
So, a degree in philosophy just caused me to continue this curiosity and this questioning of why. And when you look at the status quo of where the world is today, I think if we don't question it, we're in a huge heap of trouble. And that what we need to be doing is reimagining, deconstructing it, and figuring out how do we create a more just society, at large. And so for me, the bug actually came first year in university. I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur, which is a whole different thing. But I remember going around and people asking you, when you're 18 years old, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I'd say, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. And they'd say, great, cool. What's your idea? And I had none.
So that's a problem.
I don't want to be, right? A charlatan in disguise. And it wasn't, I just had a pivotal moment with my journal one evening. First year of university, I had all these business ideas. None of them were sticking. And I realized in hindsight, I was asking myself the wrong question, which is what company do I want to start versus why? Right? When I was with the journal this one evening, I put on my 18-year-old philosopher's hat. And I said, well, what do all entrepreneurs have in common? And so I did a if-then statement. So I said, well, all entrepreneurs design solutions to problem sets. And I wrote on the next line in my journal, I can choose the nature of the problem sets I want to solve. And I wrote on the last line, well, therefore, I'm only going to work on problem sets worthy of my life's work. And it was
fabulous.
Just a theoretical moment. But the thing that we know, is that entrepreneurship is hard, right? The only thing I knew when I was 18 is that the odds are stacked against you. That 9 out of 10 companies in the U.S. don't exist 5 years after formation. And I figured if I'm going to leverage my sleep, reputation, relationships, equity into starting a company, why not start something that if we succeed, we bend history in the right direction because we chose to solve a hard problem. Right? It's just like, why wouldn't you? I just don't understand, And so that catapulted me down, a path that eventually led to Unreasonable. I didn't have a community of fellow entrepreneurs who kind of spoke the same language, right? Who wanted to solve these BFPs, who wanted to put a dent, on these impossibly hard problems, but wanted to use for-profit business to do it. And Genesis of Unreasonable was a selfish desire to seek refuge amongst fellow misfit entrepreneurs, just to have a community where we could say, maybe we can, let's go after it. And that was really the start.
And then you've been in Boulder how long?
I've been in Boulder since university. So I am, 17 years now.
Okay, so it really you've got the essence and you've got the energy in the place as
Yeah,
well
very
that
much
helped
so.
you. Very much like Boston when I was just getting out of college, and it's kind of an entrepreneurial hub, which
Totally
I fed
agree.
off. Yeah,
Well, and
that's great.
Carol, just one comment on that. Yeah, I grew up in a really small town. We had about 2,000 people when I was growing up there in Washington, and so I was looking at university in Boston and New York and other places. And but when I came out to Boulder, what the startup community here does have a lot of power. It's like shocking for how small it is. It packs a punch. But what I loved about the community here is it's so supportive that it's not competitive in the same way that I find my time in like the Bay Area can be, where if you're an entrepreneur, you're in the Bay Area, maybe you raise a $50 million Series B round, and instead of saying, "Oh my God, that's so awesome," the first question is, "Well, who was your lead? What were the terms? What was it?" And in Boulder, there's this small town pride where it's like, well, if a company's really successful here, we all benefit because the community, shares in kind of that ownership and feel. And so, I've been here ever since, and just really love the community. Yes, there's a lot of intelligence, but there's also just a lot of care here.
A lot of secret sauce.
Yeah, I
And
think so.
that contributes to a lot of the food at startups, but other
Totally.
things. So, share with our listeners the projection from institute to the group, because I think that the group has gotten very large, and I would like people who are listening are going to say, "Ooh, I want to be part of that." And so as we have this conversation, I want them to understand where they might fit in if they have an idea, they have a client, they want to be a partnership.
Unreasonable Institute was the start, and we began as a nonprofit. We existed to support an early stage ecosystem for entrepreneurs trying to profitably impact at least 1 million lives each. They were trying to launch new companies, though. And what happened after running the institute for the first 3 years, I just really began to believe that when it comes to trying to solve these tough problems, that impatience is a virtue. That we can't do it fast enough. And so the question was, well, how might we put a dent on these global issues more quickly? And the realization was scale. And so the transformation of Unreasonable Institute to Unreasonable Group was working from early stage startups to growth stage private companies. In essence, you might be bringing clean drinking water to 2 million people, and it's profitable. Our question is, okay, how do we take it to 200 million people faster? And so that was really the shift. I was going into growth stage companies and trying to, we don't put out a call for applications for entrepreneurs. We scour the globe, we handpick, and we privately invite those we believe are best positioned to solve one of these BFPs, be that in healthcare, education, renewable energy, future of food. Yeah, that was the primary shift. And for us, why group? In terms of name, part of it is, what do we do? And we can get more into it. But I say at the end of the day, we create community. Like if I were to put it into one word, we create community between entrepreneurs, investors, and institutions to profitably solve these BFPs. But the idea that people talk about competitive advantage, right? What about collaborative advantage? Like that's our core belief. And so the concept of being a group or community is just really at the heart of what we do and why we exist.
So talk a little bit about your favorite values, because you're beginning to talk about them. You talk about collaboration versus competition. And I think that the way you're structured and the way that you seek out the entrepreneurs, that they have to fit through these obstacles, these jumps, to fit in. But they have, obviously, the results prove that the values are working.
In terms of our values, which ones are the favorite? That's a really hard question.
I know all your children are gorgeous.
I do appreciate no assholes as just a core value. And to be more candid on that one, part of it's fun to say and it's catchy, but the truth is that even great people can be an asshole at different times. And what we're really saying is, don't be an ass. Like, come in to this community with a kind of open-hearted, transparent, collaborative, give first mentality, and you're going to get more out of this than anything you've been a part of. And so I do think that value is important. We think there's a fine line between arrogance and confidence. And that actually what we're looking for in the entrepreneurs we support is this paradoxical mix of confidence and humility, right? They have to have confidence. You have to have insane confidence to think that you can, feed 200 million people, right? Or that you can reverse climate change through carbon sequestration and recycle it into jet fuel. Like, you have to have a lot of belief and confidence, but the humility is an acknowledgement that you can't do it on your own, that there's no single panacea solution for any of these issues, that the greatness of what you achieve will be through the greatness of your teams and the strength of your relationships. And so the no assholes basically means we don't work with people who are arrogant, but we do seek out people who are confident and humble. I think the value, or the one we have some fun with, which is family and health first, which is at the end of the manifesto. But that it's a nice thing to say. When it's put in practice, it's really powerful. I think with all of our values, our question is, not so much just what are the values, but how do they show up in time and space, right? And how do we what are our policies? What's our nomenclature? Our habits that will enforce them. And how do we, deeply encourage them? And that one's important. Family and health first. We really do believe if anybody gets sick or anything happens to their family, they do drop everything. And the team will cover. We have, at least in the U.S. by standards, I think, pretty fair paternity and maternity leave. It's 4 months fully paid for both. We have a 7-year sabbatical policy. 7th year of working at Unreasonable. It's 6 months sabbatical, fully paid. Actually, that's not true. 3 months are paid. The second 3 months are half paid. I just corrected that. Right. But there's a lot of places. Like if we went through all of the values, I could give you 3 or 4 examples of how we try to have them show up in time and space, and so thereby we're accountable to them.
Okay, but these values, and I climb the right mountain, no bullshit, learn always, magic's in the details. Why are those values so important to the success of what you've created and the outcomes?
Great point. I think that in my mind, culture is much more powerful than strategy, and our values are at the root of our culture. The analogy I like to use is from one of our mentors, George Kemble, who's the founder of the D School at Stanford, the Center for Innovation. He's just so excellent at creating culture, and a culture in particular of creativity and kind of creative liberation. And I asked him, so how do you scale that? Like, how do you go, team of 5 to a team of 50 to a team of 5,000 to like Accenture 500,000 people? Right? How do you possibly keep that kind of sense of culture alive? And he gave me an analogy that we really live by, which is he talked about a school of fish. And he said, look, if there's, if you look at a school of fish, there might be one with 50,000 fish, and they're moving together in this almost emergent kind of beautiful unity, right? And if you ever watch those videos, you'll see it. And he asked me, he said, well, how do you think that works? Do you think there's a CEO fish in the middle of all those fish yelling at them? Saying, go up, go down, move left, move right. He's
left,
like, no,
right, yes.
Right? What it comes down to is beliefs and behaviors at the individual fish level. And I said, well, what do you mean? And he said, well, think about it. Let's pretend that you had 3 localized rules or behaviors for the individuals. The first one, fish, right? The first one is swim as closely as possible to the fish next to you. The second one is if you see something dangerous, swim away from it. And the third one is if you see food, swim towards it. All of a sudden, it doesn't matter if you have 5 fish or 50,000, they're going to move together in this emergent creativity. And so for us, those are like our policies, our traditions, our habits, but they're rooted in our values, right? And so I think our values, I think that's how we'll scale, is the truth.
Well, you certainly have scaled already. Let's take a break and find out what else is happening besides this podcast that you may want to know about. Today's In the Know is about Larry Fink, CEO of BlackRock, the world's largest asset management company with over, I think it's close to 8 trillion assets under management. In his letter, I'm going to read a few parts of it today because it's stunning. Larry Fink's letter is like a shot heard round the world. In 2019, he talked about that every company must have a purpose if it is to achieve its fullest potential. Well, now he's focusing on climate change. But let's listen to a bit about his letter. BlackRock is a fiduciary to our clients, helping them invest for long-term goals. Most of the money we manage is for retirement, for individuals and pension beneficiaries like teachers, firefighters, doctors, business people, and many others. It is their money we manage, not our own. The trust our clients place in us and our role as the link between our clients and the companies they invest in gives us a great responsibility to advocate on their behalf. This is why I write to you each year, he says, seeking to highlight issues that are pivotal to creating durable value. Issues such as capital management, long-term strategy, purpose, and climate change. Then he goes on to talk about the pandemic, a pandemic that has enveloped the entire globe and changed it permanently. Well, we all know of the dark times during the past year. But he also says, despite the darkness of the past 12 months, there have been signs of hope, including companies that have worked to serve their stakeholders with courage and conviction. We saw businesses rapidly innovate to keep food and goods flowing during lockdowns. Companies have stepped up to support nonprofits serving those in need. In one of the greatest triumphs of modern science, multiple vaccines were developed in record time. Many companies also responded to calls for racial equity, although much work remains to deliver on these commitments. And strikingly, amid all of the disruption of 2020, businesses moved forcefully to confront climate risk. We are all in this together, he says, and climate risk is now the biggest challenge in front of us. He also talked about how investors in mutual funds and ETFs are now rapidly moving into sustainable assets. There was a 96% increase over the whole of 2019. And he says, I believe this is the beginning of a long but rapidly accelerating transition, one that will unfold over many years and reshape asset prices of every type. We know that climate risk is an investment risk, but we also believe the climate transition presents a historic investment opportunity. I'm glued to CNN these days, and I was really taken aback when then President-elect Biden was introducing his cabinet that would focus on climate. I was thrilled to see that he appointed John Kerry, former Secretary of State, to be his climate envoy, his voice heard around the world. And I'll share with you a little known fact that's a personal one, that when I was on John Kerry's presidential fundraising committee many years ago, at a snowy winter breakfast, I met one of my colleagues there who introduced me ultimately to the man that I was to marry, my husband, Harry Silverman. So I have a lot of fondness for John Kerry. And he almost attended my wedding. Almost, but not quite. Anyway, getting back to In the Know. So I am thrilled that Larry Fink, in his letter this year, is focusing on climate. He's focusing on and really challenging the companies that they are investing in to up their game substantially in all their climate actions. And you're going to hear a lot this year about net zero goals. So let's go back to Unreasonable and our conversation with Daniel, because you're going to hear about they're pre-public companies, but they're companies that are dealing, many of them, with climate change in the most profound manners and ideas. Let's get really specific about partnerships. And I would love to hear about the Barclays partnership. It's been a long time. You have your own, I think, cut at it. It's called, I think, Unreasonable Impact.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. And I've watched some of those videos. And so, because I think people are going, yeah, I want to hear more. How does this really work? So share that with us.
Well, it's a good point. So one thing to acknowledge that, 247 CEOs that we support through the Unreasonable Fellowship, we don't charge them anything. And in fact, we cover their costs and we'll support them for life, so long as they continue to run an impactful organization. So then how do we survive is an important question to answer. And it's through, the courage of the partners that we align with. And Barclays is our, largest kind of cornerstone partner. Together, we kickstarted an initiative called Unreasonable Impact. And the focus is on scaling up growth stage companies in the green economy that are rapidly creating jobs. And so more particular, green economy basically means work with companies where the better the business does, the healthier the planet is. So that can be, sustainable transportation. You could be looking at clean air. It could be looking at drinking water, food production, whatever that might be. Obviously, energy, renewable energy. But the second side is job creation. We wanted to align with companies that are positioned to create at least 500 jobs in 5 years from bringing them into the fellowship. The first thing to acknowledge is when we teamed up with Barclays, I thought that was an odd theme for a bank, because I would have thought that we would have worked on global financial inclusion. That would be something that would make sense to me. And I remember sitting with the leadership at Barclays and basically telling them, look, if this is just sponsorship, that's why you're doing this, we're not going to touch it, because sponsorship is AstroTurf. Like everybody knows that that's not real, right? I said, so tell me, why does the bank, the core bank of Barclays, care about green and care about jobs? And in essence, their leadership said, look, what the green economy is going to do to the world is in essence, analogies like the internet. It will permeate every industry, every sector, soon to be every geography. The future of business will be green. Barclays knows that. They're enlightened enough to realize that. And they said, we need to be the premier green bank. And they said the second thing is, if you're going to create 500 jobs in 5 years as a company, well, you're probably going to need a bank as a partner. And we'd love to work with you to help scale those efforts, because their belief was that the entrepreneurs we were working with are, quote unquote, the future titans of industry. And they want to be at the forefront of helping them early. So long story short, we've been in partnership. We had a 3-year partnership. It got extended to 7 years. And we're looking at, more so there. But I think what's exciting is together, we've helped over 100 companies, specifically in the Asia Pacific region, Europe, and then across the Americas. They're all tackling climate change directly with profit, and they're creating, jobs. But at the same time that we're helping this top down, the bottom up innovation, scale entrepreneurial solutions that work, we're also seeing a magnificent shift in our partners towards more sustainable practices in their core function. So Barclays launched the first new coverage group in their investment bank in 70 years, and it's focused specifically on environmental, call them green companies that are for the betterment of the planet. They've changed their investment thesis of their kind of off-balance sheet investing to move off of, in essence, fossil fuels to renewables. And what they're also doing now is they're helping their clients, the biggest energy companies in the world, transition more quickly to sustainable practices by connecting them to the entrepreneurs that we're supporting them, who can show them a profitable future around sustainability. And so they're a delight to work with, but also we're seeing real change happen between our organizations, which has been phenomenal.
That's an amazing story, because you started out, I love when you say sponsorship equals AstroTurf, and I'm going to use that. And I remember when we had that breakfast and you were saying, well, we're trying to do this. And I think, isn't it financial inclusion? And it was kind of a struggle then. And so what happened? What was the shift where all of a sudden they saw internally this could change their business, and then they pivoted to change their business?
Yeah, this was driven. The partnership comes out of the citizenship team at Barclays, is where the genesis was, and their goal was to not do what banks have typically done in the past, which is make a ton of money somewhere and then donate that to very worthy organizations. But what they wanted to do is say, how do we impact the core of the company? And Deb Goldfarb and Mark Thane over at Barclays, I really believe that they could. And the honest truth is that they did. And the way they did it is through, the programs that we run. We will bring together typically a cohort of about 13 growth stage CEOs. And then we'll match them with about 80 mentors over over an intense period of time.
So you embedded this deeply into Barclays.
So the mentors are the MDs and the C-suite and the board members across the global financial institution that is Barclays. And when they get proximate to, we'll give some examples, but to the types of companies that we support, you can't not believe that this is inevitably the future of business.
I mean, you did something that I call, in a massive way, a walkabout. When we want a company to get into a social issue, you got to take the senior leadership and go on the ground. But you had them working together. So that is brilliant. So can you give a couple examples of some of the companies that have been mentored and that are flourishing?
There's so many. Let's go first. Maybe I'll play around with food. So there's a company, the entrepreneur there is Mike Zelkin, based out of the Heartland in the U.S. It's called 80 Acres. They're looking at the future of agriculture. COVID, just to speak to the timing of this podcast, it's exposed all the issues that we already had. And one of the massive issues is the number of people in this country and around the world who go to bed hungry every day. And specifically in densely urban populations. And so 80 Acres is it's a vertical farming company. So hydroponic farming, aeroponic farming. The reason it's called 80 Acres is the very first pilot farm that they set up. It was a city block, a small city block. So it was a quarter of an acre was the footprint of the building, and they were able to produce 80 acres worth of crop yield. So that's 320 times more efficient than traditional agriculture. What would take 320 acres they could do in one. That was their first farm. They're now much more efficient than that, to be clear. But it's a phenomenal business that's bringing affordable food at incredible high quality of nutrition without the need for sunlight or soil to populations that never normally had it.
And how much is that? How much are they locating in food deserts?
Pretty much exclusively.
Really?
Exclusively. And literally they're actually going to deserts now. They're starting to look at Nigeria and into the Middle East as well for expansion. But Barclays was a huge partner. They just led their Series B round, and Barclays invested off their balance sheet to co-lead this round at 80 Acres. And now they're talking about, leveraging the scale of the bank globally to move the farms around the world.
Can you imagine telling that story within the bank or for potential recruits? I mean, that is so extraordinary and exciting. And I think I saw some of your videos. So I assume that they have, once they get the proof, that they are talk a little bit about the communications, because I want to know how this cascades within the bank.
The bank's now rallied behind the partnership, and they've gotten really good at this. So I would say when we started working with Barclays, they did not know, like most global financial institutions, they did not know how to work with startups. Even if a startup could be, you made $100 million, like it's still a startup, right? In that world. And what's happened over the years of, this partnership and getting closer and closer with these CEOs and understanding their key needs and challenges, and then realizing opportunities in the bank, they've actually gotten really efficient and really effective at it. And so when, one of the companies, like, if an Unreasonable fellow says, hey, I can create plastic out of carbon dioxide, and they need a connection into, X firm, let's say IKEA, right? Either Unreasonable or Barclays, we can get that connection in because, they're a 330-year-old institution, and they have boardroom access into basically every large company on the planet. They've been able to now, and I think a big part of that is just trust in our partnership. But they've been able to do it really quickly. I mean, it's mind blowing the efficiencies that are now there versus were there or weren't there. And I think to your point, what's interesting about a bank, and obviously we work with other types of multinationals, but a bank in particular is really aligned because they're in the business of scaling companies. That's what they do. And now if we can, if the executive of a bank now, instead of, doing their day job, making a bunch of money, and then maybe donating their time at a soup kitchen, let's say, which is important work, if they realize, oh my gosh, I can combine what I'm best in the world at, which is helping companies scale, with having a massive impact that I can be proud of because of the nature of the companies we're supporting, it just lights people up, to your point. So it goes through, I would say, and the citizenship team is still, they're kind of a beating heart of this, and like the central nervous system of the bank, because they don't live in any one pocket, right? And so like, okay, you need to talk to the commercial bank or the private bank or, the investment bank or the private placement.
So they cut across. So they are allowed to get, not go out of the fence, go out of the corral, and really tie in with others.
And pull in whoever needs to be pulled in. You're right.
So how did you find such wisdom at the bank?
Yeah, I blame Mark Thane and Debbie Goldfarb, okay. Which are individuals.
All right. Well, I totally. Hopefully, we can interview them, because I think to hear the other side, I think it's brilliant. I have a question for you. Would you, and this you don't have to answer it, but is Barclays your exclusive bank customer? I mean, if some other bank came to you, would you work with them, or would be different sets of issues? How do you do that?
Yeah, we certainly could. We're in conversations with actually a couple different banking institutions. We wouldn't want it to be directly competitive by any means, but Barclays, they're doing this for the right reasons. Yeah, in essence, they said we're not going to require exclusivity to sign this partnership because we just want these companies to win. And at the end of the day, they know that, look, in any one of our CEOs, if they're going to do an IPO, let's say, there's a dozen banks that all kind of look the same, right? And Barclays knows they're not going to get any type of exclusive access. But what they do have is the chance to add value and build trust early on. And so when that entrepreneur does want to do an IPO, who are they going to bank with? They're going to go with the one who were
start the dance with, of course.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So this is brilliant, and I'm glad we really drill down into it. What about another partnership that you have that's perhaps a little different?
So I was actually this morning talking with our partner at Accenture. It's a three-way partnership. So Fossil, Accenture, and Pearson, they've all come together to launch Unreasonable Future. And Unreasonable Future, what we're looking at has been accelerated by COVID, but it's an acknowledgement that the advanced technologies that exist, yes, they're exciting in terms of potentially solving key challenges related to healthcare and energy access and zero waste supply chains and so on. They're also scary in terms of what it means for the future of work in particular. And so Unreasonable Future is an initiative where we're looking at bleeding edge technologies and how they can play a role in creating a more just workforce in a digitized world. And so it's a really interesting combination, though, right? Because you have Accenture, largest consulting firm on the planet, 500,000 full-time employees, which is an unbelievable number. They think this is the issue that business is going to face and governments are going to go.
Yeah, reskilling, upskilling, all of that. Yeah.
Lifelong learning. Yep. Pearson is the largest education company on the planet. Right? They know that the future of learning is not going to be analog and in classrooms, to be digitized, personalized, and it needs to lead to results, which means work. and then Fossil is a phenomenal company that has a supply chain. Right, they have a lot of employees that they really care about, and as things get digitized, how do they bring them along for the journey, reskill and upskill? So it's this really cool, unlikely partners. You kind of use that word, and together we're bringing together entrepreneurs that are showing what that world is going to look like into the future around education, learning, reskilling, upskilling, job placement, kind of all of that.
Okay, so how do you get the three of them to play nice together? What's the secret sauce to that? Because you get the competitive person. I want that piece. I want that story. I want that entrepreneur. So how do you make them work nice or the values? Like, don't show up unless you follow our values.
It's what's the intention, right? Okay. Like, do we all care about solving the same global challenge here? And the answer there is a resounding yes. And then this is the term I used earlier. It's actually from Accenture. Ryan over there used it where he said, we talk about competitive advantage, but we don't talk about collaborative advantage. And what happens when you have these unlikely partners across industries coming together to work with a unique mix of entrepreneurs to solve a key problem? You're going to get breakthroughs that you would never get on your own, right? I also think that most all these companies are led by great people who want to do good to the world. They have a lot of pressures, right? Especially when you're a public company, but they want to bend history in the right direction and not perpetuate the challenges that we face. And so I think when given a invitation to collaborate, and if we can make that easy, then people are more than willing to do it. And we'll even have in our fellowship, we have companies that are head to head as direct competitors as you could possibly be. And yet they're collaborating and working with each other, and it's not a thing because there's enough poverty in the world for all of us, right? Muhammad Yunus said that there's still 2 billion people who don't have access to electricity. Like these are bigger than just one company.
So who came first, Accenture or Pearson?
Actually, Fossil was the first one.
Fossil came first.
Yeah,
okay.
Fossil came first. And we had been working with Pearson on something called the Project Literacy Lab, which was looking at entrepreneurial companies that could put a dent on literacy rates. That's still a big focus for them, but I realized that education's got to morph into lifelong, right, and lead to these types of outcomes in the real world that are important in terms of jobs. And so they jumped on, and then Accenture was last to the party, but certainly not least, and it's just been an incredible. It's been an incredible trifecta.
I love the trifecta. So my question to you is that do you have anyone like a me that comes in and says, Daniel, here's a social issue area that we have got to deal with? For example, social determinants of health disparities for underserved. And so do you ever work around, well, there's some place that we really want to solve, and then you decide, let's pitch the idea to 2 or 3 potential partners and start a whole nother unreasonable impact direction?
So yes, occasionally, yes, we'll say we really want to work on this problem. Let's try to take it out of the world. But usually it's inbound. Usually it's Johnson & Johnson reaching out to us and saying, hey, we want to look at universal healthcare and what that's going to look like, and especially in emerging markets, or that's whoever it might be, IKEA say we want to look at zero waste manufacturing, so on and so forth. And so typically it's inbound. I think once also governments too, but companies or governments understand kind of what we can do. They're usually going towards us. We do really want to, in particular, launch an initiative called Unreasonable Inclusion, looking at racial justice. And this is, primarily looking here in the U.S. Because of what was sparked last year in terms of awareness has, as you know, been going on for 400 years in this country. And we think that the private sector has and needs to play a role in looking at that challenge. And so that would be looking at affordable housing, credit access, at educational access, at food access, and so on.
So are you looking for, if there's anybody listening that's a large corporation that wants to really accelerate their D&I, they should reach out to you? Yeah,
at a systemic kind of societal level. Yes, we would love that.
So that's it for our podcast today. I hope you enjoyed the 2-parter with Daniel Epstein. We could have gone on forever. I'm going to bring him back because I really would like to talk to some of the companies that they are funding. Also, people ask me, hey, Carol, what do you do besides podcasts? Well, to move the thinking forward, beyond our podcasts, many of you know of our Cone research. I've done over 30 pieces of research over the years. Our most recent piece was done about a year ago, the B2B purpose paradox. And let me tell you, B2Bs are diving in deep to this. And we also do the work. So we provide consulting to companies that want to discover their purpose, they want to evolve their purpose, they want to find a really unique social purpose. It might be for an anniversary, it might be for a new cohort of recruits. So we just love doing the work too. So we also give workshops and best practices trainings. So if you need to accelerate the knowledge of purpose in your organization, just send us a note and we'll get right back to you. Carol at carolconeonpurpose.com.